limits done by our scorekeeper, Hélène Rivet. And also to remind you that the mics are controlled by our sound keeper, Ray Lamb, at the back. The candidates will each have 4 minutes to introduce themselves, followed by a question period for your questions, and then a closing statements for 4 minutes each as well. So we're going to begin. We did draw by random which of the two candidates would speak first, and our first municipal candidate to speak will be Shad Qadri. Shad, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Louise, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see everybody here this evening. I first of all want to thank all of the people that have been helping the situation that's happened in this city over the last couple of days at Dunrobin and down in Barrhaven and in Knoxdale area. I think support from the emergency service has been very, very well received and well acted. I also want to thank the councillors of the area who handled the situation very well. Most of all, I want to thank the residents not only of our community, but also those communities that have been affected. I'm thinking especially of Dunrobin area, because this is their second foray into a disastrous situation where they had flooding at the start of the spring and now this. It's unfortunate, but the devastation did happen and they're recovering. I've suspended my campaigning on Friday evening, late Friday evening, and I've been out working with the community because we did have a relief center set up here at Goulburn Rec Complex also for the last couple of days, and so that's where I've been at, and you know, it's been good serving the community. I'm proud to be your councillor, city councillor for the last 3 terms at the City of Ottawa, and obviously a Stittsville councillor representing you at the City of Ottawa. You know, people say, you know, in terms of a city councillor, what does he or she do? I'll tell you, city councillor is a very, very important role in terms of representation of the community and representation of its people in the community at City Hall. But we don't only do that at City Hall, we do that throughout our other partners in the community and in the city. You know, a couple of things that we have accomplished this term together as a community of Stittsville: the preservation of Sherwood Woods, where we paid, I think, $1.5 million cash, but there was other land exchanges to preserve that piece of property that this community has been using for over 30 years in terms of an unofficial dog park. Success in receiving funding for the parks and renewals of parks. That's again something that we've accomplished as a $1.7 million investment in that. Successful in receiving funding for building a public high school. We just had a couple of candidates here this evening for the Board of Trustees that were talking about that, how important that decision is for this community. I've been fighting that fight since 2003, even when I was not in politics, because that's how valuable I think that piece adds to this community from an education perspective. Stittsville, believe it or not, is becoming a desirable place to live. People want to walk into here. They want to live here. They're voting with their feet. You can see that with our population increase. I mean, we're at 35,000 now. We're expected to be almost 70,000 in the next 25 years. That's a lot of people coming in. But that's saying to your community that they appreciate Stittsville. This is how you talk about economic development. When people want to live in your community, you know you've got a successful community. Just look at your own property values, how much they've gone up over the last little while. The bringing of LRT, or the not bringing, sorry, of the completion of the environmental assessment for LRT to come out to Stittsville and Canada. Is Stittsville the final resting place? If it's going to come in terms of the design plan that's already put into play, it will be between the Toys R Us location and Bush Tucka on Hazeldean Road. And it's going to come on an elevated platform over the Queensway, serving the Canadian Tire Centre at the second level and coming further down. Now, I know that's a couple of years away, but at least you know that the plans are out there. In terms of city councilor role, you got to be respectful.
Thank you very much, Shad.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'd like to invite Glen Gower to present his opening comments.
Thank you, Louise. And thanks everyone for being here tonight. I'll echo Shad's words. I think all of us are thinking about friends, families, neighbors across Ottawa and Gatineau who've been affected by the storm on Friday night. I know I've been impressed with the outpouring of support, offers of support from this community and from across the city, and I think it says a great thing about the kind of city that we live in here. I think back to when my wife and I first moved our family to Stittsville, and we were struck right away by that sense of community. And right away, just like we've always done, we got involved as volunteers, helping out at our daughter's school, helping out with our daughter's sports events, sports activities. Before long, I joined with some of my neighbors to form the Fairwinds Community Association. Since then, we put on countless events and worked on projects to improve the health and safety of our community. As a volunteer, I've joined the boards of groups like the Stittsville Village Association and Heritage Ottawa and the Western Ottawa Community Resource Centre. These are all groups that are focused on building healthy communities and ensuring that we live in a great city, a great community here in Stittsville. About 4 years ago, I launched a website called StittsvilleCentral.ca, an online forum to bring people together. I saw an opportunity to provide a forum so that people could become more informed and interested and engaged on local issues. And then on May 1st of this year, I filed my papers to become a candidate in this municipal election. And since then, I've had a lot of fun actually knocking on thousands of doors, talking to thousands of people over the past few months. And whether people have lived here for 50 years or for 5 months, there are a few themes that keep coming through again and again and again. Healthy development, safe streets, and accountability. Accountability is what tonight's event is all about. Where do Shad and I stand on the different issues? A lot of these are very challenging issues. What is our approach? Issues like growth. To me, this is a central issue that's facing Stittsville today. Suburban growth and urban sprawl. And Shad, you've said that growth is a wonderful thing, but I think many residents here would disagree. It can be a good thing, but not the way that we're doing it now. And even Jim Watson recently disagreed with you. He said growing out is all about urban sprawl, which no one is supportive of because it's very expensive and it's not good for the environment. Something needs to change. Accountability is how the city spends your money. You have to acknowledge that since amalgamation, our taxes have gone up, but the quality of service hasn't kept pace. Basic services like snow plowing, road repair. In fact, council has underfunded infrastructure to the tune of $70 million. Things like roads, parks, community centers are in bad shape. And meanwhile, we've spent $4 million on a bridge over the Carp River and $100,000 on a gazebo at Village Square Park. Are these the best fiscal decisions? And if we're talking about accountability, I hope we hear tonight about John Woods, which has been a failure of planning, of communication, and now execution. And yes, Shad, you had a conflict of interest and had to recuse yourself for a short period of time, but nothing should have stopped you from being a strong communicator on the issue, and now an advocate for residents on nearby streets who have serious and legitimate concerns about safety in their neighborhoods. You've blamed staff instead of stepping up and taking responsibility on that file. Now, we're all here tonight to get informed, and I think many of you may still be undecided. I think we can all agree on one thing as we start, which is we're all here because we all care deeply about the future of Stittsville. And I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and concerns tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Now, we've heard the opening statements from both our candidates, and you are welcome now to pose any questions you would like. A question, if anybody still wants a ticket actually for a question, you just have to raise your hand and Tanya Hine will come around and give you a ticket. I will be choosing these at random, so it's a fair chance for everybody to ask a question. Just so that you know, you will have 45 seconds in which to ask a question. Our candidates will have 2 minutes to give their answer. And I would ask that this evening, each candidate will have an opportunity to give one answer per question, so there will be no rebuttals to any questions. But you're invited to ask another question subsequent to it if you'd like. I would also ask you not to repeat your question, so that if you've already asked one of the candidates a question, it doesn't get re-asked later by another individual. But that question could be asked to the other candidate, if it wasn't given to that candidate. Is that clear to everybody? Yeah? Okay. So I will now choose some tickets here. I'll ask you to line up at the microphone over there. And I will choose 3 at a time so that you can be in line waiting, supporting each other as you wait for your question. And if you need to speak and adjust that microphone, it goes up very easily, just lifting that handle so you can personalize your custom comfort when you ask a question. Okay, so I will now choose 3 numbers from amid your tickets. And I don't know whose numbers are what, so. Okay, so I'll just give the last few numbers. Too bad we're not drawing for money or anything, but anyway, it's for your question. We have number 298, 269, and 290. If you'd like to advance to the microphone, that would be excellent. Thank you very much. Very good. So good. So we have 2 out of the 3 numbers. Is the other person here who either 269, 290, or 298? If you're not here, I'll simply continue to draw if you choose perhaps not to ask your question. Okay, so we'll begin with your first question. You have 45 seconds to ask your question, and you need to tell me to whom you wish to place your question, with whom. So either one or both of the candidates. Okay?
This would be for Glen Gower.
Excellent.
Glen, just a quick answer on this one, just so before I proceed. With the garbage, did you say that you would change it to every week if you were elected?
You're referring to the
garbage
CBC
pickup.
interview.
Is that the question? You're asking about garbage
Well,
collection?
if the answer is yes, I just need a clarification on that one. And if the answer is yes, then I have a follow-up on that one.
Okay, so what's your answer, Glenn?
So I said it's something that I think the city should look at and consider as an option for garbage moving forward.
Okay.
Okay, so
I guess it wasn't a definite yes, because
you have 45. There's our timer here. You have 45 seconds now to place your question.
Okay.
One question is it, and then they will have 2 minutes to answer. Please proceed.
Thank you. Now, if I believe as a leader, sometimes you have to lead with what you think is best for your ward, not necessarily what the answers are when you knock on doors. Because yes, when you knock on doors, the majority will say, I want everyday garbage pickup, or not a weekly garbage pickup, to bring that back. I get that, because obviously no one wants to deal with the maggots and the inconvenience and the gross factor. But as a leader, don't you think you need to kind of step up? And sometimes it may go against what the population wants, but in the long run, it would pay off. So this is where I needed to really get a clear answer from you. Are you going to do what necessarily the majority want?
Okay, that's your question then?
I'd just like to ask a quick follow-up. Are you still working in the councillor's office?
I am.
Okay, we're going to...
If I'm not allowed, then I will...
You're speaking as a citizen?
Yeah, I
Okay.
live in Fairwinds.
Okay, so, and you live in Fairwinds, so you're a
Yes.
citizen in the community. And in that capacity, you're asking your question?
Yes, but
Okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed or not.
Okay,
I
what
was
I'm going to
given a
do,
ticket.
both people will have an opportunity to answer your question, though, to be fair then. And
Of
I'm
course.
actually going to allow Shad to make a comment first, and then we'll go to
Sure.
Glenn.
Thank you very much for the question. And in terms of garbage pickup or garbage, we pick up garbage every week. The green bin is your garbage bin.
Yeah.
That's where all the compost is. That's where all the smelly stuff is. What's left over, the remnants in your regular garbage should be all dry material. Pieces of plastic or pieces of wrap from a bacon wrapper. But those can be rinsed and put into the garbage bag without making a smell. Besides that, we pick up recycling bin every week. 1 week is black bin, 1 week is blue bin. So if you're doing recycling, and I remember Glenn mentioning in his comment with the CBC or with the debate on Rogers, the fact that we're at less than 40% recycling in the city. That's not fact. The fact is that we're 50% in recycling in terms of the city of Ottawa. Where we lag behind is in our multi-residential units. This is where you've got one chute coming down in an apartment building, and that's where our recycling is about 17%. That brings it down to about 44% across Ontario. Still leading, and not leading into any municipality, but still pretty good. And we're working on that as a city to educate those residents and educate the new developers in terms of when they build new buildings to build separate chutes in order to accommodate compost as an ongoing basis. Compost, whether we realize it or not, is a resource. In Sweden, they look at garbage as a resource, not a liability. And that's how you do garbage right.
Thank you, Shad. So, Glenn, if you'd like to answer the question.
So Ottawa's diversion rate is well below 50%, which puts us as one of the bottom municipalities in Ontario. Clearly something isn't working with our current approach to waste diversion. That includes green bin, blue bin, black bin. What I'm suggesting is there are other municipalities that have taken a different approach to how they manage garbage collections. Many Ontario municipalities have gone with a weekly collection for everything: black bin, blue bin, green bin, everything all in 1 week. They've also been able to achieve a higher diversion rate from the landfill. Part of the reason for it is we have a weekly bag limit or a bi-weekly bag limit of 6 bags, so average 3 per week. Along with going to weekly garbage, the idea is that you would institute a lower bag limit, perhaps 2 bags. Some municipalities have even gone smaller than that. That's a way to incentivize and encourage people to work on diverting more waste. What we're doing now isn't working, and what I'm saying is we need to be open to other ideas that have been successful in other municipalities and be open to that to improve our diversion here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I'd like to invite the next question, please.
Hi, I'm Michelle Charlton. You mentioned, so you are the owner of Stittsville Central. You mentioned that you built it, you curated it. It is your baby. A lot of that is very hostile to Shad, and it has been since inception. How does I understand that you delegated the work to someone else, and you're not running it specifically, but you are still the owner. I'm just curious in terms of election law, what that categorizes it as, because it is a media outlet under your control. Is it a third party? Is it something that has to do with your campaign? I'm kind of confused as to legally with the Elections Act where that falls.
So is your question only to Glenn?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I'd ask Glenn to answer that, please.
Yeah, so StittsvilleCentral.ca is a website that I launched 4 years ago, an online newspaper, online blog. I have training as a professional journalist. I have a degree of journalism from Carleton University, and I stepped away from it completely May 1st. I filed my nomination papers May 1st. I continue to be the owner, but from an editorial point of view, I have no control. That's been completely delegated to another journalist.
There's no rebuttals to the questions, please. Is that your answer, Glenn?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll proceed to the next question. Thank you. Yeah, would you like to make your question?
This question is for Shad.
Okay.
Shad, would you be so kind to go over the improvements in infrastructure and modernizing our infrastructure, what has been done over the last several years and what is in the plan? Example, Carp Road, for example, going to Hazeldean. Maybe you could elaborate on that. And also some of the perhaps, I don't know if I want to call them successes, that we have been able to achieve in collaboration with other levels of government.
Okay, thank you. So Shad, we have an opportunity to answer that.
Thank you very much for your question, and thank you, Louise. In terms of the infrastructure in this Stittsville area, my commitment to that started back before I even got into government. Was the issue about Hazeldean Road not being wide enough. It was a 2-lane road with gravel shoulders at the time. And so what I did, there was some funding from the federal government and the provincial government that was brought into the city, or worked as a program. And I went to my city staff and the CEO of the staff, and I said, look, we got this money for infrastructure project. What about Hazeldean Road? We need that widened. Oh no, Councillor, it doesn't work that way. You're in line with 3 other projects in the city because they're shovel ready also, and so is your Hazeldean Road. I said, great. I went to my MP, Gord O'Connor at the time, and I went to my MPP, Norm Sterling. And I worked with both of them to say, gentlemen, this is our community. How do we serve Hazeldean Road and get it done? Now, that was in the first term. Sure enough, 3 days later or a week later, the CEO walks up to me and he says, Councillor, I don't know what you did, but congratulations. Hazeldean Road is your first project in the city. And it was rated at $65 million investment. You know, people talk about the bridge, talk all you want, but that bridge serves an important function to our community. For example, pathways from underneath the bridge. They lead communities and connect communities. That bridge has been, to me, It's better than the culverts that was being served under the original Hazeldean Road. That's just one project. You talk about other infrastructure projects in this community that have come up and that I've worked with other levels of government and brought those projects into fruition. And that's where I'm all about, is getting results. Doesn't matter who I have to work with. I work willingly and openly with those levels of government and people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shad. I'll now choose 3 more lucky numbers.
Louise,
from
can I address that one too?
Actually, it was addressed to Shad. There will be an opportunity if anybody else would like to clarify that question. They can ask you later, Glenn. Okay, so I'll choose 3 questions here now. I invite numbers 286, 274, and 299 to come to the microphone. Yes, Marilyn, if you'd like to go ahead.
I'm not the first number called, though.
Do you want to raise the microphone, Marilyn? We can't hear. Want to just...
I'm just waiting.
Marilyn, can you raise the microphone a little bit so it's higher for you? Oops. Oh, okay.
What
That's
the
an
hell?
option. Yeah.
Excuse me.
That'll work.
I'm in charge. Shame on me.
Oh, here comes Ray. It adjusts from the middle
I
section.
know it's supposed to live.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
That's excellent. Okay.
Whether they want to or not. Anyhow, so
thanks.
I will stand up here and ask for
So
clarification.
we'll start, I'd like to start, are you timing okay? Sorry, we'll
Yeah,
start
well,
45.
I seem to have lost
Yeah.
some time.
There we go.
Thank you, Helen. Anyhow, I will stand here and ask Glenn to give us some clarification on the last question, because I find it very interesting that Mr. Qadri has to refer to a project over a decade old now as his major infrastructure achievement. So
And what's your question, Marilyn?
my question is asking Glenn for his clarification as far as the infrastructure question is concerned.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Glenn, you may respond. You'll have 2 minutes. Okay.
Well, what I was going to say was, when we're talking about healthy development, the transportation infrastructure is central to that question. Do we have the roads and transit to support the growth in this community? We often see houses being built, and then it is 5, 10, 15, 20 years, a generation, before there's roads and transit to support it. Light rail will someday be great for Stittsville, but we're still looking at least 15 years away before it comes even close to here. So that's a priority. We either need to slow down the growth or speed up the implementation of the infrastructure to support that growth. That's really key to having healthy development in this community.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Okay, I'd like to invite the next question then.
Hi, my question actually relates to that. I'm asking Shad, what improvements are going to be made to transit for the young people of our community to get in and out of Stittsville, especially with the expected growth that you spoke about earlier?
Thank you. Shad, you may respond. You have 2 minutes. 1 moment, please.
Thank you again
There
for
you
the
go.
question. And transit, I mean, I remember back in 2004 or 2005, there was a meeting held at Sacred Heart High School from this community about busing. And people stood up and said strongly, we don't want busing. We know when we moved out to Stittsville, where we had vehicles and cars, times have changed. And I want busing in this community now, because we have a lot of young people, we got a growth going on in this community, so the busing is an important piece of the puzzle for this community. I've been working with OC Transpo for the last year and a half, discussing some of the concerns that our community has had over the years about express routes, 262, 261, and 263. The service level every September across the city is poor on busing, because you got new drivers, you got new routes, you got new connectivity. The other issue for us in Stittsville is, because of the growth, some of our roads are not even connected yet. For example, Main Street to Maple Grove Road. That should have been done, and it needs to be done, but the problem is the road is on a private property, that we can't go in and build a road without having permission from the private property owner, or until they get us a development application, which is what's happened in that particular location. We will be building that hopefully in the next 2 years. Those are the kind of things that we're facing. Buses in Blackstone, for example, can't go in on certain streets, so they can't even connect to Abbott Street for that matter at the present time. That's all going to change. Once that road infrastructure is there, we've created Abbott Street now all the way out to Castle Frank. There's your road infrastructure to expand the bus service out. And that's what we're working on, and that's what take, building a city is not like building a city on Sim City. It's not that easy. It takes time, it takes effort, and most importantly, it takes money.
Okay, thank you, Shad. Okay, I'd like to, I guess I'll just pick some more numbers. Okay. Here we are. So our new lucky people are number 283, number 279, and number 275. Are some of you here and still wish to ask a question? No? Oh, yes, one lady? Okay. If there's, I'll choose a couple more since no one else has gotten up. Okay. I'll try to mix these little tags here. Okay. Number 277 and number 278. Anybody say bingo? No. There was 277 and 278. Okay, so it looks like we have two questions. That's excellent. Okay. Thank you, Ray, for adjusting that. Okay, please give us your question.
This question is directed to Shad.
Okay.
As a member of the Bryanston Gate community, I have watched the appalling changes to the neighborhood following the closure of John Wood Street. You recused yourself for a short period of time. Well, I regret to say that. You recused yourself for a prolonged period of time from which you did not need to be excused from informing the community about this closure. You were asked between 2011 and 2015 if the road was closed, and you had no idea it was closed, and yet these plans were solidified in 2009. I would like to know where your interest stops and how you can rectify this.
Thank you very much. The question is for Shad, please. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Carol, for the question. John Woods started back in the discussion on John Wood started back in 2007, 2008 in this community. There was actually a public meeting held in the community at 2008 about possible closure of John Woods. The community attended, and there were comments. Those comments are registered with the city, and that's where the process started. Prior to that, the process started also with Canada West Concept Plan, where they had said at the time that John Woods did not need to be there with their traffic studies that they had done, and they said John Woods should close. When they brought the item together with Matamy's development in Pool Creek, or Fairwinds West, sorry, that's when the decision was made to close this street. I had to recuse myself because I bought property in 2012 backing onto Matamy's Fairwinds West, and that's why I had to recuse myself. And because of the legal advice that I received from my lawyer, that was the right course of action for me to take. In terms of informing the community, the news article, there was a news article in the Stittsville News at the time suggesting that those draft plan conditions that I saw in early, like you said, in 2013, but that was on a draft plan condition, not a final plan. That had to go through committee and council, and that's when I had to recuse myself from that process.
I wish I could.
Okay, thank you. No, there are no rebuttals. Thank you. We'd invite a new question.
Yes. I have a question about the part of Carp Road between Stittsville Main Street and the Queensway. It's a very inappropriate road for a community where so many people commute. When are we going to get that road completed? In my lifetime?
To whom are you addressing the question?
Both.
To both. Okay, so let's begin with Glen, please.
Okay, thank you. It's a priority. I was asked recently in one of the questionnaires from the local media, what's a priority for your ward? Carp Road is a priority. It's a rural road that's serving a community of 35,000 people. It's long overdue for an upgrade. There's a plan in place. All it needs is funding, which is a commitment from the city to put the money forward. It needs to happen as soon as possible. I've talked to commuters who live in Westridge area and Timbermere. Some of them are, as a shortcut, believe it or not, taking the Queensway all the way to Carp Road and then coming back down Hazeldean Road to avoid the traffic. That says something isn't working, so that needs to be a top priority for our community.
Thank you. Okay, and Shad?
Thank you, Fran, for the question. In terms of the Carp Road, we did an environmental assessment. Before I go to the EA, let me describe the conditions on Carp Road. Carp Road is serviced by 3 different councillors in this city. The portion from Main Street to Rothbourne Road is under my leadership. From Rothbourne Road to the 417 is Councillor Moffat's, and from 417 North is Councillor Shanteri. Having said that, environmental assessment was done on that road in terms of widening that road from Queensway down to Main Street, well, down to Hazeldean, not Main Street, back, I guess, about 2 years ago, and it was completed. Suggestions were made about putting traffic circles where the current traffic lights are, but that we couldn't come to an agreement, so it is going to be traffic light and not traffic circles at Ketawake, for example. And that the environmental assessment, like I said, is done. We're waiting for funding from the city to make sure that that road gets widened as soon as possible. I'm not waiting another 2 years for that road to be widened, but at that point, I do know it has to go into the city's transportation master plan and widen that road as soon as we get that money.
Okay, thank you, Shad. Okay, thank you, Fran. And we'll have another question, please. It can go higher too, yeah.
Is that? Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Hi, Shad. Hi, Glenn. So I've lived in Stittsville for 19 years now, and we've had discussions, and I've heard people comment about transportation and buses and light rail, and frankly, just my situation, I don't care about that. I'm more interested in, and this is for both of you, I'm more interested in how we're going to create a little bit more of a walkable Stittsville. For me and my family, we like getting out and wandering around. There are some really cool restaurants and places to go now. But I think that we need to look at that and how we can improve it. For example, when I walk up Abbott Street during the day, it's wonderful. When I walk at night, there's portions of it that aren't particularly well lit, and I have concerns for my children. Well, they're not children, my grown adult kids.
Okay.
Oh, and full disclosure.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
My wife works for Shad, so the question is for both of you.
Okay,
so I just want to make sure that
Thank you.
You know that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll ask Shad to answer first this time.
Thank you for the question, Peter. And again, walkability of this community, of any community, is very, very important. We're talking about healthy lifestyles and healthy communities. In terms of Main Street, we have 2 sidewalks on that street, one on both sides. The issue is we don't have a safe bicycling network on that street. So right now I'm working with the city and just feeling the city out of taking one sidewalk in that area and turning it into a multi-use pathway where you can put bicycle as well as pedestrian on the other side of that street. So that's one example of making it walkable as well as bicycle friendly. The other thing we've been doing over the last 3-4 years is widening some shoulders on certain streets. Ivor Road is being one of them. Fernbank just got done. We're widening now, working on an area traffic management study for Frenchwood to do the same thing. What those widened shoulder does, it gives you that capability of walkability. What we are going to do on Ivor Road next year is put what we call delineators, and I'm sure you've seen them, the round poles on the side of the road. Where what it does is the widened shoulder could be used for sidewalk, could be used for pedestrian or bicyclists, and we've done that north of Maple Grove Road on Huntmar between Maple Grove Road and the Canadian Tire Center. That happened about, I guess about 8 years ago under my leadership because I thought that that's what was needed for safety, for make it walkable. The other thing is we don't have a pedestrian bridge across the Queensway to get to Tanger Outlet. We talked to the provincial government and said, you're widening the Queensway, what about widening the bridge desk? And they said, no, that's your responsibility. So now the city has to go and put a footbridge across there. And that's what Councillor Wilkinson and I have been working on for the last year, making sure that this community becomes walkable. You look at all the pathway networks that we've got along the Pool Creek corridor, the Trans-Canada Trail. Those are all walking facilities along that area. And Peter, I agree with you in terms of Abbott Street. The lighting should be improved.
Thank you very much, Shad. Thank you. And now Glenn? Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Peter. It's interesting. I'm glad you mentioned the safe walkway across the Queensway. That's actually an issue that the Fairwinds Community Association and the Arcadia Community Association in Canada North, something that we've been advocating for a number of years, had a number of initiatives underway to bring awareness and get that project completed. Paved shoulders are not sidewalks. They are not a safe alternative to sidewalks. There are so many streets in this community that they've changed since they were first built in a rural community many years ago. Fringewood, Hoban, Maple Grove, John Woods, Fernbank, I could go on and on. They're badly in need of upgrades. The city has a priority pedestrian plan where they prioritize sidewalks. When I started looking into this plan, I was amazed to see there are no Stittsville projects on the priority list. Canada North, Canada South have several projects each. Stittsville does not. There's clearly a need and a desire in this community for better sidewalks, better walkability. Peter mentioned lighting, also in the winter, plowing of pathways and sidewalks to make sure they're a usable link year-round. There's a lot more we could be doing to help people get around in our community.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Okay, I'll pick some more numbers for 3 more lucky people. Okay, we have number 282, 297, and 285. You're welcome to come to the microphone if you still wish to ask a question. Okay, I see 2 people coming forward. That's excellent.
If everyone can hear me, I'd like to speak without the microphone.
Okay, can everybody hear her? Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Over the years that we've been here, when we have made suggestions and asked questions, I'd like to address this to both candidates, by the way. We've been told, well, the rules are such and so. So I'll give you a couple of examples, but at what point do the 2 candidates think that the rules should be challenged? As an example, Main Street, at this end, the traffic is appalling. And the rules say that we can't have traffic lights and stop signs. As another example, walking is great. I love to do it, but I need to sit from time to time. I think the rules say we can't afford benches. That needs to be changed so that people who are impaired can walk.
Thank you, Kildine. Okay, so I'll invite Glen Gower to respond first.
Sure. I think the easy answer would be if there's a need for change, there's a way to change the rules. Most of what the city does is policy based. It's rules that are put in place through initiatives through staff, approved by councillors, that dictate how roads should or shouldn't be built, that dictates how pedestrian amenities should or shouldn't be built. There's always an opportunity for change, and the city should always be looking to other cities, other municipalities for best practices. So absolutely, if there's a policy or rule that doesn't make sense, we need to push to change it. I think a great example of that, and Kildine, I know you've had personal experiences with the Ontario Municipal Board, the OMB. For many years, the OMB had the final word on planning decisions, taking away planning decisions from the cities, and it's being decided by a tribunal, often siding with developers. For many years, it seemed like that's something that could never be changed. It'd been there forever, but there were some councillors in the city, downtown wards, interestingly, who really pushed hard for this, who said, we need a better system that better respects the wishes of residents, the concerns of residents, and they work with Queen's Park to have changes made to the provincial laws, and now there's a tribunal rather than the OMB. It just began earlier this spring, so we're still seeing exactly how it rolls out, but it's a good example where the rule's not working. There are ways that you can advocate and lobby for change and better represent the needs of residents.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Now, Shad, you may address the question.
Thank you very much, Louise, and thank you, Kildine, for the question. In terms of the rule changes, that you asked for, Kildine, and Glenn just mentioned about the OMB, the new tribunal, when it comes into play, and that was featured by Yasser Naqvi, who made that part of his platform, and said, I want to change the OMB. Now it's a tribunal. What the tribunal does is if the decision coming from City Council is appealed and goes to the tribunal, and tribunal agrees with the appeal, that decision goes back to City Council. The tribunal will not rule on it like the OMB did. So it'll go back to City Council, and City Council has an opportunity to either change their decision or keep the same decision. The changing of the rules, yeah, they can be changed by councillors in terms of as a council direction. And that's something that, I've tried to do. I'll give you one quick example of economic budgeting. When I walked into City Council, I guess back in 2006, 2007, I looked at something called the vacant positions. You ask, what is a vacant position? It's a position where somebody's gone on LTD or short-term disability, and he or she is unable to perform their function. So the position sits in that office budget or in that department's budget until the council removes it or until they decide to fill that position. I said, well, that's wrong. When you got a position sitting vacant for 4 years, do you really need that position? Let's look at a different way of doing things. And that's exactly what we've done. Now, every budget cycle, council gets a report on what we call FTEs, full-time equivalent employees. And that is a benefit to going budget forward. The other thing the council did was said, anybody that's vacant or any position that's vacant for 4 years or more, get rid of it off the books and then come back to council for if you need the position again. And that's what you call changing the way we do business. Thank you.
Thank you, Shad. Okay, we invite a new question.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi there. My question is for both candidates, please. I take the bus downtown every day. It takes me 3 hours every day out of my day. I have 3 children at home who take the bus to go to school, and it takes them also 3 hours every day. Stittsville is a growing community. I feel that OC Transpo has not listened to our concerns. We have late buses, buses who don't show up, on and on. Why do we still have to play second fiddle to Canada? We need more direct buses that come to Stittsville at different times of the day. I asked both candidates on Twitter if they would commit to riding the bus for at least a month every day. I would like to hear from either of them or both of them on this, please. What would you do to advocate for better transit for Stittsville? Thank you.
Thank you. I'd invite Shad to respond. You have 2 minutes, Shad.
Thank you very much, Louise. And Audrey, thank you for the question. The bus service in this community, especially the express routes that you take in the morning, we've had some hiccups. I'm not going to deny that in terms of especially 262. Now, last year, 263 was the same way. And this year, 263 is performing at 94% efficiency. The 262 is still a little lower in terms of 80% efficiency on time and, in terms of arrivals. The issues that you raised about buses not showing up, I did check with OC Transpo, and I'm sure, and I'm positive I responded to you, that morning the bus driver was ill and he couldn't make the trip. That happens in operations on a regular basis. Now, we can't have buses sitting idle on the side to say, okay, go fill that spot because somebody's ill or somebody's not feeling well. We have to take that bus from another route to put into our route. The issue then becomes is capacity. Because we have elongated buses as well as double-decker buses. So sometime when we're changing that route because of illness or equipment failure, we don't fill it up with the regular extended bus or the double-decker bus that should be there. It ends up with a small bus, and that in itself is a frustration to the riders because now you're overcrowded and the bus leaves you at the station standing and doesn't pick you up. So those are some of the concerns with OC Transpo. I'm working with John Manconi, the general manager of OC Transpo. He's guaranteed me that in the next probably 3 months he's going to do a review for Stittsville as well as some of the other areas of the city, OC Transpo service, and see how we can make improvements and changes to the current system.
Thank you very much, Shad. Glenn, would you like to answer?
Thanks. I want to call someone out here. My dad is here. Wave hello, Dad. My dad took the bus every day for his entire career as a public servant to Tunney's pasture. So bus riding, I guess, is in my DNA. I don't take the bus now. I work in Canada North, and the bus trip there is 75 minutes long. I can take the car there in about 20 minutes, although every month it seems to get a little longer. I can bike there in about 30 minutes, or if I really get my legs moving, maybe 25. I actually responded to Audrey's question on Twitter, and I said, yes, I will commit to taking the bus every day for a month. I think it's important that councillors have that perspective. After all, $520 million of the city budget goes to transit, and I really wonder how many councillors are taking the bus on a regular basis to get the perspective of drivers and riders. I've been listening to transit riders, things like some extra rush hour buses in the morning that run just a little bit later in the morning so you can get your kids on the bus, on the school bus, and then head downtown. Or a little bit later in the evening, so if you miss your bus, you're not looking at an hour and a half, 2 hour commute that you can get home on a direct bus and avoid all the milk runs all through Canada. Or looking at direct routes, there's a lot of military families in our community working at DND. Many of them bike in the summer down the Trans-Canada Trail. They'd be very happy to have a convenient bus route that goes from Stittsville to the DND headquarters. There's a lot of opportunities for improvement. It doesn't have to all be about billion-dollar LRT. It could just be a focus on operational efficiency, fixing the lateness, fixing the reliability. You know, transit ridership has been going down the last few years. Manconi seems to be confused. Well, the transit fares go up, the reliability isn't improving. It doesn't seem like a big stretch to be able to figure out why.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Okay, it's an opportunity now to choose some new numbers. If you forgot your number, take another look at it. Here comes the new winners. They are number 268, number 302, and number 272. Please come to the microphone, if you will. Thank you.
I have a question for both candidates, Glen and then Shad. The Canadian Tire Centre is a big part of the Stittsville economy, as Shad so proudly tells us that it's in Stittsville. But there is a possibility, however remote, that the Senators may be moving to LeBreton Flats. If that's the case, what is your vision for the CTC?
Okay, so I'd like to invite Glenn to answer first, and you have 2 minutes, Glenn.
Another clarification. Adrian, are you still working for Shad in his office?
Proudly. I'm also a citizen and the former president of the Blackstone Community Center. Community Association.
I think it's important to...
I appreciate pointing that out, Glenn. You do have the right to ask a question, but we have the disclosure. You're asking as a citizen.
I'm asking as a citizen, absolutely.
And you'll be responded to and such. Okay.
Okay. You know what? Part of the reason I'm in this area is because I used to work for the Ottawa Senators, working for Cyril Leader, and had a great run when I was working there. We made it to Stanley Cup finals. We had the draft. Got to know a lot of people, especially part-time staff who rely on Canadian Tire Centre as their source of income, you know, as a supplementary source of income. And you think about all of the restaurants and all of the businesses here in Canada and Stittsville that are supported by Canadian Tire Centre. It's an incredibly important economic piece of the community. It's also private property. It's also owned by the Senators. It's not a public facility. I think it's a priority if I'm elected to start that dialogue with the Senators, with the public. What is appropriate as a use for that space? The decision ultimately ends up with the Senators and what they're willing to invest and what they're willing to move forward. But now is the time to start talking about it. I'd like to make sure whatever goes there continues to have the positive economic impact and net gains in terms of part-time jobs and full-time jobs, continues to be an important part of our community.
Thank you very much, Glenn. And Shad, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you again, Louise, and thank you for the question, Adrian. In terms of the Senators, or in terms of the Canadian Tire Centre, it's a massive piece of property, not only the building, but the lands around it, which is partially owned by the Senators Corporation. You know, to worry about what's going to happen in the future and not start with it today, I think is, you know, for going forward and saying, oh, let's wait till when it happens. I'm not waiting for that. I've already started some conversation with some of the partners in this community, not because the Senators are on private property or anything, but just to see what are the appetites, not only in this community, but are there funding partners that would be willing to participate in terms of redeveloping this site. One of the classic examples I'll give you is Calian Technologies. They just moved from Canada North into my ward because they needed more space. How many other businesses are like that are in Canada North that need to expand? So I'm looking at, and I won't give out the details yet because nothing is finalized, working on something that would work as an economic development center, as an employment center, and possibly portions of it as an entertainment facility. That's what we need to do now. Let's not wait till when the senators decide to vacate the property. Could be 5 years, could be 8 years, depending on how well you work with the NCC. But I'm not waiting for that. The time to start discussions is now, and I've already started those discussions. The reason being, if we don't start those discussions today, tomorrow it could become just a wasteland, and I don't want that to happen. The zoning around the Canadian Tire Center for some of the land is mixed use, as well as some commercial development could happen out there. As you see, there is all kinds of opportunities for Canadian Tire Center for us to redevelop it, and I'd be very proud to work with if I'm re-elected as the councillor for your area. Thank you.
Thank you, Shad. And I believe we have another question waiting. Yeah.
Yeah, so just disclosure, I've knocked on doors for Glen as a volunteer.
Thank you
but
for
just
disclosing.
quickly here, Bryanston Gate, I think, Shad, you're failing us big time in Bryanston Gate with the closure of John Woods when you say, oh, all this stuff. Well, you've even admitted that the consultations weren't accurate and proper the way they were supposed to happen. It was a done deal. The company was selling the lots at a premium rate because they were going to back out onto a park that no one in Bryanston Gate knew was going to be a park. And the only people who can actually access it right now, based on the plans, are the Mattamy Homes people. The Bryanston Gate people, once they get that water station pump completed, we won't be able to get through there. And the other thing you were saying, you should be focusing on getting Main Street to Palladium off-ramp. Forget about your Maple Grove idea, because all you're doing is creating a secondary highway with Maple Grove. So that question's for both of these guys.
Okay, so we'll begin then with that question to Shad to start.
Thank you. In terms of the John Woods closure, that was a city decision, and I didn't throw anybody under the bus, as Ms. Glenn said to earlier. It's not throwing people under the bus. The city staff, if you read my posting on my city website, that is still there and was posted in May 2016. It explains the chronology of events that took place in that application, and it tells you where the application went from there. Now, having said that, I think I've said enough about John Woods. The records are all there on my website. Anybody can go and look at those records. Going forward, in terms of your question about connecting Main Street to Palladium Drive, that is a long-term plan for this city, for this community, because that is where Main Street's supposed to end up. Some of that plan may change slightly, may not go all the way to Palladium. It may go through to Robert Grant and connect with Robert Grant, and Robert Grant would be the only entrance into Palladium Drive. But that's something still in discussion with the ministry, because entrances to 417 are controlled by the ministry and not the city. And once that happens, that's exactly where Main Street is going to end up. The reason why it's going to connect to Maple Grove for the temporary period, because the land going northward is still not all applied for in terms of development application.
Thank you very much, Shad. Glenn, would you like to comment? You have 2 minutes.
So I guess there were two parts to Steph's question. One was John Woods and the other was the connections for Stittsville, Maine. On John Woods, I'll just echo to what I said in the opening. The councillor did have to recuse himself from decisions, from planning decisions. There was nothing preventing him from staying informed on the file or informing residents. I don't know how many people in this room were at the consultation meeting a couple years ago. We were all told it was a consultation meeting about the closure of John Woods. We all got there and it turns out the closure was a done deal. It was a consultation about the landscaping around it. So a total mess of communication, and I still can't understand how you weren't properly informed and how you did not know about the issue. But leaving John Woods aside, in terms of the connections, it goes back again to this idea that we have plans for roads, plans for connections, but they are often decades away. A whole generation will live in a community before the roads and transit are built out. Obviously, there's a gap there, and we need to address that.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Okay, I will choose some more tickets. The pile's getting a little bit smaller, but it's still good. Numbers 293, number 271, and number 303. Nobody jumped up? Oh, good. Okay, 2. Excellent. Okay.
Quick question for Shad. It seems to me when you first became a councillor for the city, you said you were going to run for 2 terms. I had a lot of respect for that because I think we need to have new blood coming into the council and people that aren't sitting there for life. So I'm just wondering, after 12 years, why you've decided you want to be a councillor for life, and if there's any things that you're saying today that we should wonder if you're going to change your mind about come the next election.
Thank you. So, Shad, you have 2 minutes to answer that question.
Thank you very much for the question. The 2-term limit that I did say at the in 2006 that I was going to run, when I finished my 2nd term, realized that there was lots of projects that still needed to be done for this community. And I felt that I was the best candidate at the time to go forward with that. People talk about term limits. Ladies and gentlemen, we have automatic built-in term limits. It's called election every 4 years. So if the community decides in that 4 years they don't want Shad or whoever the other candidate is, it's available to you, ladies and gentlemen. People did elect me for that 2nd term and the 3rd term. I had competitors in each one of my terms. So it's not something that I got acclaimed at that point because I didn't keep my 2nd 2-year term promise.
Thank you, Shad. Okay, I'd invite the next question, please.
This is for Shad. How come they never proposed the light rail transit to go right up through Bell's Corners and up through Stittsville here, using existing rail bed that's been used for years and years, instead of building a brand new one so the city council and the mayor can have a photo op and ribbon cutting situation?
Thank you, Shad. You'll have 2 minutes to answer that. There you go.
Thank you, Louise. And thank you for your question. The rail line that you're talking about belongs to CN, CP. Certain of them are CP, certain are CN. They're heavy rail lines. If you did run them from here, let's say across the city, how do you unload those passengers downtown? You have no station downtown anymore. Before, when they were going to the Union Station, and there's no capacity or capabilities of doing that now. That's when the city decided to put an LRT system in, and that's what we're working with. First, the LRT system was going to go north-south. In 2006, the council of the day, including me in that council, decided, no, we had to change the route. We didn't want to go north-south because the city's developed along the Queensway, east-west, and that's where the LRT would make sense to go first. And that's what we were working with, that plan, and that's where we are today. Now, in terms of coming out to Stittsville, Glen mentioned that, through you, Madam Chair, Glen mentioned the fact that the LRT is, 15 years away. Yeah, it is. But the issue is, it's one of those major projects that's going to help the city become a world-class city sooner or later. It's better now than waiting even later.
Thank you, Shad. Okay, the next question, please.
Sorry, that's me. I was originally going to ask about transit because I'm a commuter that has to go downtown every day, and I also have kids at school that have to be at early care. But I'm going to let that go because both of you answer that. And to Glen's point, thank you for pushing for more options for 262 to come later. What I want to talk about is Main Street a little bit more, and I want to talk about immediate needs as opposed to 3 to 5 to 10 years down the road. I live in central Stittsville, so not far from Quitters. I can't get out from Bray Street onto Main Street in the morning when I now need to drive because there are no buses to get me to work. Some mornings I've waited 17 minutes to turn left, to then cross to get to Main Street to Carp Road, another 20 minutes, and then I hit, obviously, traffic on the Queensway. You have talked about the walkability and how it's important. How can you walk a street when there is that much traffic?
Thank you very much.
To both.
May I ask you to whom you're addressing your question?
To both, please.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll begin with Glen then, please.
Yeah, if you have a chance, go to my website and go to my blog, and I recorded a video with 5 ideas for Stittsville Main Street, and the very first point was about the traffic on that street. I mentioned truck traffic specifically, but all the traffic on Stittsville Main Street is a real impediment to having a healthy street there, and it's a major inconvenience to commuters like you who are trying to move around. There are shop owners who are losing business because people can't turn in and out of their businesses, and like you said, there's residents who are having trouble getting out. Bray Street is one where I think it definitely makes sense to be looking at, if not a full traffic light, at least a pedestrian crosswalk, which would provide breaks in the traffic and have the advantage of a safe crossing point for pedestrians as well. There's all sorts of things we can do on Stittsville Main Street in the short term to improve the health on that street. Beautification projects like hanging plants and so on. I'd like to see some more animation and programming at Village Square Park to bring people in on the weekend. We need to start thinking of that street, though, if we do those things, thinking of it as a people street rather than a highway to move cars through. So in the short term, there are things we could do around traffic control. A little bit longer term, we need to find ways to funnel the traffic off of Stittsville Main and onto other north-south routes like the future Robert Grant. That's got to be a priority.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Shad, would you like to answer?
Thank you very much, Louise, and thank you for the question. In terms of the Robert Grant Avenue, is a perfect example that will take heavy truck traffic once it builds out to the Hazeldean Road. Right now it's coming up to Abbott from Fernbank. We need that piece between Abbott and Hazeldean Road. Once that's complete, my intentions are to remove heavy truck traffic or heavy vehicles off of Main Street and put it on that road. So that will give them a nice proper north-south arterial. In terms of Main Street itself, Main Street is the main artery of Stittsville. It's not just traffic flow on it, but there are people that come from the south end of this community, in terms of not our community, but Richmond, Munster, Ashton. That is their shortest route to the Queensway. That's why the Main Street's so busy. What they try to do, we tried building Westridge Drive as part of a bypass to Main Street. That didn't work. It's too far west. Then we tried Terry Fox, widening Terry Fox in certain spots in order to make that appeal for the Richmondites and other people in the south end. It didn't work. So what we have to do, like you said, do something with Main Street, and that's what we're working on. In terms of the question about Bray, we've looked at the Bray intersection for the last 5 years at where Jojo's Pizza is. In terms of traffic flow coming out of Bray, on Main Street it meets all the warrants. On coming out of Bray, it does not. So what I did, there was an easy solution for me on Wintergreen. On Wintergreen, this community had been fighting for a traffic light for 29 years. So what I did with staff, and I said, if one intersection on that corner does not meet warrant, because Warner Colpitts and the street beside the church, they both lead to the same venue, which is the arena. I said, why don't we count traffic on both intersections and see does it meet warrants? That's what I'm planning on doing this term with staff and say, let's measure traffic on both corners of Bray Street and see if one or both of those corners meet warrants in order to put traffic lights.
Thank you, Shad. Okay, it's time to choose some new numbers again. So we have 284, 295, and 294. You're welcome to come to the microphone.
My question is for both of you. I'm interested not so much in a Stittsville issue, but in your role as a member of the council at large. I'd like to know what your commitment is and what you would do to encourage the development of more affordable housing in the city, particularly in the West End.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Shad to answer first, and Shad, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for that question, an excellent question. In terms of affordable housing, it's been lagging in the West End, and it's been lagging for a number of years, not just West End and other parts of the city. So one of the things that the City Council has just done is something called inclusionary zoning. Now at the present time, that zoning only applies to transit-oriented development stations or areas, where what we're asking the developer to do in those areas is to include affordable housing as part of their development. That was an idea that was floated even in this community, I guess about back in 2003, 2004, to ask the developer that if you're building X number of units, let's say 400 units in a subdivision, at least make 1 or 2% of those or even more affordable. That never flew. What happened in this community, affordable housing became affordable housing in terms of what the kids could afford. I mean, this community has had high housing prices for a long, long time. And what happened was we said affordable housing through higher density. And that's what we've done in terms of making it affordable for the kids. But the sector you're talking about is more like subsidized housing and affordable housing in that scenario. And that is what we're working with as a city to make sure that we spend money on that in terms of first fixing up our own stock. And even that, sometimes takes challenges because should the city be in housing business? Or should we give it to a private sector and see how they work with it or how they can do it better? But having said that, right now we have housing in our own sector, subsidized housing, and we have to do a better job of that, not only building more, but maintaining what's existing. The other thing is the multi-faith housing that the city is working with. There you've got some great improvements, and you've got some great new projects coming forward for that affordable sector.
Thank you, Shad. And Glenn, you have 2 minutes.
I wanted to start by saying I think affordable housing, the issue of affordable housing, is a Stittsville issue. It certainly is a Canada and Stittsville and West End issue. I've had my eyes open to the issue through my work as a board member with the Western Ottawa Community Resource Centre, and we've recently launched some advocacy work to raise awareness that affordable housing or issues of low-income individuals is not just a downtown issue. It exists all over our community. One area in particular in Stittsville where this would probably have the biggest impact would be on seniors, low-income seniors. It is a public responsibility, it is a private responsibility, it's all of our responsibility to fund affordable housing. There's opportunities with the new LRT and new LRT stations to use some of the public land surrounding these areas in order to invest in public housing, affordable housing initiatives. There's also many private sector and many nonprofit sector groups that are willing to come to the table and work in partnership with the city in order to build more affordable housing units. I do support inclusionary zoning as well. It's been proven to be effective in other jurisdictions as a measure. Another thing is the city spends $12,300 a day on emergency shelters. So these are for people who are in the worst situations and need temporary housing until there is space available. They need that temporary housing because there's currently a 10-year, 10,000 person waiting list. So clearly there's a lack of funding and of initiatives. By the way, that $12,300 a day adds up to $4.5 million per year. That $12,000 is being spent on hotel rooms, emergency hotel rooms, because there are not emergency shelter spaces. There's an opportunity right there to invest that money into actual buildings, actual units, rather than throwing it away to hotels. So lots that the city can be doing to make a difference here.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Okay, your new question.
I have a question for both councillors. Sorry, both candidates. Maybe one day they'll split the ward. So the light rail is not going to come to Stittsville for many years, maybe 10, 15, maybe my grandkids will benefit from it. But my question is, to what extent are either of you willing as councillor to stand up to the mayor if he wants to change those plans in that 10 to 15 years before it comes? A Barrhaven councillor has tweeted that she would like to see the light rail be diverted to Barrhaven instead of Stittsville, and Jim Watson offered his tacit support by, well, maybe not tacit, his support by liking it on Twitter. So I'm wondering to what extent either of you would like to stand up to the mayor on that issue.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask both of our well-respected candidates to answer that question. And I will ask Glen Gower to answer first with 2 minutes.
I'm very willing to stand up, and I'm very willing to work with the other West End councillors in order to be a strong voice. I think it's an area where we could have used a much stronger collaboration and cooperation between the West End councillors on this file. Barrhaven has bus rapid transit, a good bus rapid transit system. Orleans will soon have a great light rail system. Canada and Stittsville always seem to be left behind. So I'm quite willing to stand up and be a strong advocate and get investments and get it out here to Stittsville and Canada as soon as we can.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Shad?
Thank you, Louise, and thank you for the question. You talk about standing up to the mayor. The 3 West End councillors have already done that. We've got money from Karen McCrimmon's office, MP, to do an environmental assessment for that LRT portion coming over into Stittsville, or Canada, and to the northern part of 417. So that's already done. We've got an environmental assessment for that project already done. We've got that project with not only the environmental assessment, but a rough design plan done, where it's going to go, how it's going to get, and where it's going to, elevated or underground, whichever the case may be. It's going to be elevated, by the way. So anyway, those 3 things are already done. I know Councillor Harder, and I know Lisa McLeod. I work with both of them. I know they want to push it to Barrhaven. That's great. The issue is, if they want to push it to Barrhaven first, and the mayor and the rest of the council may want to do that in the future, I want both projects to run parallel. I don't want one taking over precedence, especially in our Barrhaven, because we're there already with the environmental assessment, we're there with the plan, and we've got a community between Canada South, Canada North, and Stittsville. We're 145,000 strong, ladies and gentlemen. We have a voice at City Council, and that's me.
Thank you, Shad. Okay, we have a new question. If you'd like to come forward, please.
Thank you. My question is for Mr. Qadri. Mr. Qadri, I have lived in Stittsville for 16 years, and over the last 12 years, 3 terms, I voted for you. And over the last 4 years, I have grown disappointed by the fact that my quality of life seems to be going down because of unreliable buses or increased traffic, not enough infrastructure to keep up with the growth, which is all. So this time I have decided to support Glen. But my question to you is, and I was hoping to hear some mea culpas or responsibility taking from you, but all I'm hearing is an excuse here and an excuse there. For example, the planning issue is something that you need to have explored before, not today.
Thank you very much. I will let Shad respond to that. He has 2 minutes starting now.
Thank you very much, Ravi, for your question, and thank you for your support in the last 3 terms. In terms of the planning, I've sat on planning committee from day one. That's how committed I am to planning, because I believe in proper planning for a community. But as I said earlier, Stittsville or any other community, it's not like building a sim city where you put pieces together and everything comes together. There's an issue with money. How do you build infrastructure that is already existing and expand it when the developer is only responsible for filling up infrastructure within the new community that he or she is building? I totally agree with you that when Fairwinds was first proposed and first designed as a community, it should have been designed with the fact that the existing infrastructure like Huntmar and Maple Grove should have been completed or widened before. But there's something called money. The developer is not going to fix infill of existing infrastructure. He or she is responsible for their current community, what they're building. But the councillor at the time, Janet Stavinga, did make a condition that Huntmar Road had to be connected between Hazeldean and Maple Grove before the developer was allowed to sell even or occupy one home in that area. The developer did build the extension of Huntmar from Hazeldean to Maple Grove. That's the kind of conditions you need to put in. In certain cases, the developer is willing to work with those conditions. In other cases, the developer says, no, thank you. The rules are these, and this is what I want to follow. And I've been working with planning on an ongoing basis to make sure that we do change some rules. Example, the community design plan for Main Street. I started that process in 2009 with the city because I agree that needs planning to do things properly, and Stittsville Main Street needs that planning, just like some of the other areas in this community. I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you the way the process works at City Hall.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to just offer an opportunity. If anybody would like a ticket who doesn't have a ticket and is feeling left out and would like a ticket, we'd be happy to bring you one. So if you just have to raise your arm, and Tanya will be very happy to come around and provide you with a ticket. Nobody's feeling left out? Okay. Well, we'll proceed then to the next 3. Okay, we have number 296, number 289, and number 301. Good. Please come to the microphone and make yourself welcome there. Yes? Yes, you may.
Is that okay?
No, that's not a question. We'll proceed with your question now, Keldine. Sorry, Ellen. My fault. Sorry. That would be a very short question. But, okay, you now have 45 seconds to ask your question.
We would both like to ask you both, do you think the time, in light of recent occurrences in this province, do you think the time has come for cities in Ontario and Canada to encourage the federal government to change the laws so that the cities are not governed by and beholden financially and in other ways to provincial legislators?
Thank you very much. And I will invite Glenn to give the opening answer. Now you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the recent events at Queen's Park have really opened a lot of people's eyes as to the powers and the limitations of municipalities and the provincial control that they operate under. Cities are the economic engines of our country. And I definitely think it is time to look at the constitutional arrangements and whether it might be time to change the jurisdiction and change the authority of cities. I'm always focused on residents and making sure that residents have a voice and that their concerns are being understood. And I think the more authority that you have, that your local representatives have, the healthier that is for democracy.
Okay, thank you very much, Glenn. And now Shad, please.
In terms of what happened in Toronto, I'm not going to make a political statement or comment about that, but you know, in Toronto, the lifestyle is a lot different. There were 47 councillors on council. So, you know, Mayor Ford or Premier Ford decided to make some changes into that. In terms of the City of Ottawa, we have a very distinct population base. We have 3 distinct sectors of population. We've got something called the Green Belt, and within that Green Belt, we have urban population. Outside that Green Belt, we have suburban population, which is where we are situated, and then you have rural population just on the south side of us and the west side of us. That is 3 distinct policies, 3 distinct ways of working with the community. For example, in terms of the rural areas, it's all about, you know, wells and sump pumps and so on and so forth, versus us with city water, city services. So there is a difference between the 3 different areas. In order to provide proper representation, for the rural areas, you have to have a number of councillors that are there today in order to provide that proper representation. So anywhere that you can make a change probably is within the suburban and urban core. I did one of the surveys and I did put something, a unique idea, that maybe in Ottawa we need to do what we call pie-shaped wards. You've got the northern boundary, which is the Ottawa River, and from there you draw pie-shaped wards outwards towards the rural areas. So as you come outside, the pie piece gets bigger. That way the councillor for that area or that pie piece has to represent all 3 populations. So that way you're getting proper representations in each ward for each sector of the population, whether you're rural, suburban, or urban. And that is my solution to that particular problem, not necessarily reducing councillors.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we will proceed on to the next question.
Okay.
We're ready to hear your question. Yes, please.
Okay, when I first moved to Stittsville 11 and a half years ago, we had a major issue with the smell coming from the carp dump landfill. And despite Waste Management's attempts to resolve the issue, it wasn't really resolved until it closed in 2011. Okay. More recently, though, an addition was built to the facility. That's Ontario, accepting Ontario-wide. And it's also adding 70 to 100 trucks per hour per lane on Carp Road, by the way. So anyway, despite that, and developers are still developing near there. But anyway, what is your voice for Stittsville and the city in that term?
Okay, so both candidates will answer that question? Is that you'd like to ask both candidates that?
Yes, both candidates,
Okay.
please.
So we'll begin with Shad then, first 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for the question, and you just hit a passion point for me in terms of landfills. In 2007, or 2005 actually, when this fight started with this community and the company operating landfill, I am and I was totally opposed to digging a hole and putting garbage in the ground. I went to Sweden in 2009 through the planning committee just to investigate what they were doing that could work even better. And boy, talk about years ahead of us in terms of garbage. It comes back down to they look at garbage as a resource and not a liability. They use every portion of that stream, whether they burn it or whether they recycle it and compost. I mean, they're so efficient in composting, they're actually taking seaweed out of the ocean to compost in order to produce biodiesel, to run some of their transport services, as an example, in a city called Malamo. So if a European country can do that, I don't see why we cannot. We've got an incinerator plant operating in, I think it's in Brampton, into Toronto area. It's very expensive, mind you, to do incineration, plus it has other implications to it. Landfill is not cheap, and please don't call it a landfill in my presence, because I call them a dump, and that's exactly what they are. You're right about the Carp Road landfill. It did get its permission to expand by the provincial government because the industrial, commercial, institutional waste, 70% of that waste stream belongs to that sector, and it's controlled by the province. That's one of the major problems in Canada. Packaging for product belongs in the federal government. The industrial sector, recycling and stuff, belongs to the provincial government, and our home garbage belongs to the municipality, the smallest piece of that. So what I'm, suggesting that, when there's a new government in Ontario, it's been 5 years since the last environmental assessment terms were done. I want those terms reviewed this term.
Now I'd like to invite Glen to answer the question.
So I believe the question was, what is our position on the dump? Is that correct? I'm against the dump as well. Unfortunately, it's moved so far along through environmental approval process, it doesn't look like it's going to be possible to stop. But we can be effective advocates to make sure that we have the best situation possible for residents who live nearby. This has been an issue in Stittsville going back, I believe, to my opponent's first election in 2006. There have been opportunities along the way to slow it down, to stop it, to come up with a better deal, pointing to Boundary Road. That's in the East End. There's a councillor there, Stephen Blay. He fought hard to make sure that there was stronger oversight in terms of the rules and the approvals that the operator got for the landfill there. So things like having the expiry, a 5-year expiry on the environmental improvement assessment that Shad mentioned, they actually have that written into the contract. It's not written into the current one here. I joined with community associations. We joined together, a number of us, 3 years ago to form a group called COLA, the Coalition for Landfill Accountability. And the point of that group was to be a watchdog, keep an eye on Waste Management, who owns the landfill, keep an eye on the provincial government and their overview of the rules and regulations around that dump, and also on our elected municipal officials. And we've been effective in bringing awareness to the issues in the community. Probably our biggest victory to date was we were able to get Waste Management to pull away or stop a proposal to allow Quebec trucks to go to that dump. So there's issues like that, odor control, traffic that you mentioned, groundwater safety, community compensation. These are things that still need to be negotiated and worked out, and these are opportunities where we can have some fairness and accountability from Waste Management going forward.
Thank you very much, Glen. Okay, I'd like to invite the new question, please.
Thank you. Good evening. My question is for both candidates. For the purposes of my question, I'll choose to define young as age of majority to 30 years of age. A challenge in almost every election is capturing the attentions of an expansive young community. How do you plan to reinvigorate and re-engage a young electorate?
And this is to both candidates?
To both candidates, yes, please.
Okay. So we'll begin with Glen this time, please.
I'm pretty happy to say that I've had the fortune of meeting with voters of all ages, all sorts of different backgrounds, new Canadians, senior citizens who lived this community for decades, and young people in the community as well. There's different ways to connect with different groups, but they're all interested and they're all engaged in local issues. One thing that I've been doing proactively is trying to get out there when I do meet someone at the door who's a first-time voter or perhaps a student, right, is working with them, asking them to connect me with their networks, right? Tell me what your concerns are. Help me build kind of that snowball effect, right? Connect me with your peers, connect me with your network. It's a concern, though. If I look at all the groups, probably young people is the one that I've heard the least concerns about through email. I'm doing what I can do to connect through social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, but it is a challenge to get young people engaged. Definitely, if anyone is here in the audience tonight has an issue or concern they'd like to talk about, I'd love to hear from you. One concern I have heard about from young people, besides transit, which we've already heard about tonight, is the need for more activities in Stittsville. more things to do in the community. And a lot of that is coming from their experience as teenagers here and a lack of community resources or facilities to support youth. One idea that I heard that I think is a great one is there's the Robert Grant Alternative School. There's a huge area out behind it in terms of a recreation space. I think that's something I'd like to look at and work with youth to see if that's an opportunity to do something exciting and do something different there and provide more facilities.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Okay, Shad, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you for the question. In terms of the young people of this community, they're no different than any other community. They're young, they're active, and they're vivid with their imagination. You know, young people, most of them are so fed up by the time they reach, teenage years that they don't want to participate in anything organized. They want to do things at freedom. So one of the examples that I give all the time that I want to practice the next summer, if I'm reelected, is to throw a volleyball net in the Village Square Park and just throw a truck full of sand. No rules in terms of what time you could play in that kind of scenario, and watch the reaction from the youth in that community to come out and play. So it's the engagement factor that you need to do, and sometimes at pizza parties just don't do it. I go to public schools on a speaking engagements, especially grade 5, who are very political savvy because they're taught that course. And the questions I get from those students are amazing. So they are engaged, whether they're engaged through their family life or whether they're engaged for other reasons. I get calls from young people in this community. I'll give you 2 examples that just happened recently. One young lady wrote to my office and said she wanted a girls' showcase, a girls' hockey showcase, because in all the facilities we didn't have one. We had boys' one. Sure enough, worked with her, worked with city staff, and got our girls' showcase. And we put a park out for consultation. Again, a young person spoke up and said, "I need to see this in that park." That's what you get people engaged with, and that's how I'm working with the young people of this community to say, how do we get you more engaged? And that's where the issue is, really.
Thank you very much, Shad. Okay, we have another opportunity for more questions. The good news is the pile has really gotten much lower, and our time is beginning to get closer to our closing statements. But I still have a little time for questions if you're still interested, so I'll call some more numbers. And the 3 following numbers are 276, 270, and 300. Anybody have one of those 3 numbers? Yes, good. Very good. Please come to the microphone.
This is a question for both candidates that regarding the LRT eventually when it's going to be coming to Canada, that if I heard correctly, that's going to be between the Bushtaka and the Toys R Us. And is there going to be a plan, like eventually for it to extend in a further future further the LRT to a certain area, and where would that be to make it most effective for the population? And I also was, why is, if you know if it's, why is the LRT in the Canada portion going to be elevated?
Thank you very much. I'll address your question first to Shad. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you for your question. In terms of the LRT, why it's going to be elevated, and I'll answer that part of the question. Because when it comes over the Queensway, it's got to be elevated over the Queensway to serve the Canadian Tire Centre, and it will be serving it at the 2nd level. From there out towards Hazeldean Road, the community is already built, so the best way to serve that community would in an elevated format. Having said that, in terms of the LRT itself, it's going to be all accessible for not only yourself but other people that may need that service. I also sit on as a city councillor representative on Accessibility Advisory Committee, with the Accessibility Advisory role and the Accessibility Act that's coming into play by 2025 in Ontario. That's going to be a necessity in order to make every station and every avenue for that area to be accessible going forward. Your question about the fact that where is it going to go next? It's a perfect mix and a perfect match at that where it's going to end for the time being at Hazeldean and the LRT station. On the north side of Hazeldean, in the south side is going to be a bus rapid transit on Robert Grant Avenue that's going to go further south, and in the future it could go, even to places like Richmond. So that corridor is already protected for either bus rapid transit or LRT, whichever the city wants to do at that time going forward. So for now, the LRT is, when it comes to Stittsville, Canada, it's going to come down to the Bush Tucker area. Now that's just a rough drawing right now, but those are the plans. And then the bus rapid transit will come and meet it at Hazeldean Road, serving the south end of the community with a park and ride at Fernbank and a park and ride at Hazeldean Road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Glenn, you may answer 2 minutes.
I'll add quickly to that. I think beyond where the LRT station may be or where the LRT needs to go, where can we look for bus rapid transit or dedicated bus lanes to improve the bus service? So once you get off LRT, how can you get home a little easier, a little quicker? I think there's a lot of opportunities along roads like Hazeldean. Even the future Carp Road, when it gets expanded, there'll be an opportunity to have, if not full-time dedicated bus lanes, perhaps there's some rush hour bus lanes, if that's something that can keep the last few kilometers of your trip once you get off of that train.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Do we have another question? Yeah, please come forward.
Yeah, this is for both. Yes, Jerry Horban. I've been here since the 80s in Stittsville. My thought is about this, the consortium on the LRT. That doesn't seem to be any accountability. The delay, now a second delay, and they don't seem to get any money paying back to the city. All I heard was $1 million, and then it costs $2 million a month to support the buses to keep going, and then we're bringing these 300 workers back. It seems like a lot of cost to the city, and I don't see this consortium paying anything for all these delays. I don't see any reason, they don't give any reason why all these delays. So if you guys could give me some sort of answer, if you guys are going to be proactive to make sure they're accountable and preventing more delays.
Okay, thank you. We'll ask Glen Gower to answer first. He has 2 minutes. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. I mean, you'll hear from Shad, I'm sure he'll say nobody wants to rush LRT because you don't want a safety issue. I completely agree. To me, the issue with this delay is what you pointed out, accountability and transparency. The way that the contract has been structured with this private company doesn't give the public the visibility into what's really going on, and it prevents the councillors from getting a true picture. The other thing is, somebody joked recently, it's funny that the councillors and mayor had no idea that LRT would be late. Anybody who's looked around at the conditions of the stations would have known that. I just think there's a lot that we haven't been told and a lot that we don't know about, and when you're spending billions of dollars of taxpayers' money, there needs to be accountability. When councillors ask questions, they need to get clear answers, and that hasn't happened on this file.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Shad?
Thank you again for the question, and again, a great question. In terms of LRT, when the city signed that contract with the conglomerate that's building that unit, the thing was that we had $2.1 billion of funding for that project. We gave that money to this conglomerate and said, you build it, you operate it within that $2.1 billion envelope. Anything over that you go is your responsibility. Any money that you may make in the end, it's yours. In terms of your question about accountability and stuff, that is going to come. There is already some questions being asked by council as well as through the Auditor General's office. I'm sure somebody's raised that question. The thing is that for the time being, I would sooner have a safe system, even if it's delayed by a couple of months, than to have a system that we get and we take responsibility and end up with all the headaches. I don't want that. I want to make sure that when the system we take over, the keys are turned over, it is a safe, reliable system, and that's what I'm working with. In the accountability department, those questions will definitely be there from council and for other members of the city organization going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Shad. Okay, it's an opportunity for another question. Oh, if you'd like to come forward.
Hello, thank you, Louise. My question has to do with
It's directed to each of you, and thank you very much for taking it. It has to do with your fiscal skills and knowledge and your strategic priority setting for our community. I also want to thank each person, just as a resident. My husband and I moved here 17 months ago, and I'm thrilled that there's so many people willing and interested in coming out tonight. I think we have a great community, so thank you. So my question is simply, of the percentage of budget that we have as a city, could you give me your best estimate, each of you, as to what you think that percentage would be and your top 2 priorities for Stittsville within that percentage? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is a wonderful community, you're right. So I'd like to ask Shad to please address the question first.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for comments about the community. You're right. As Louise just said, this is a very passionate and compassionate community. In terms of the budget's not based on, in terms of percentages, what percentage goes to which ward or which area of the city. It's based on needs, and it's based on the councillor's request on certain items and certain things that the ward may need. The bigger picture on those budget is something called like the Transportation Master Plan, which is a much bigger program where the city does a 5-year review of that TMP and says, these are the new roads that we need to build in the next 5 years in order to accommodate growth or accommodate a community, for example. In terms of the percentages, that comes out to the councillor to say, I need this, I need that, or whatever those projects are. The place where we have some say in the budget debate or discussion is in terms of where the money is going to be spent across the city. Should Hazeldean Road be built first versus Carp Road or what have you? And I'm just using those 2 examples for example's sake. In terms of the city, the budget, I mean, I've been doing budgets as a private business owner for about 13 years. Prior to that, I did budget numbers for large corporations for almost 20 some odd years. So I know the budget process from a private sector, and that's the knowledge I use when I discuss budgets at City Hall. In terms of what I mentioned earlier about vacant positions, they all have budget implications. And that's where I excel at in terms of budget deliberations and budget consultations. The issue with consultation is at the present time is majority of the public is not participating in that, and that's disappointing. I know one resident in this community that every year he tells me what the inflation rate is and what the budget numbers should be coming in, and he does his homework on that budget. But that's one resident. I want more residents to do the same thing.
Thank you very much. I invite Glen Gower to answer.
So if I understand your question right, you're asking what percentage of the city budget should come back out to Stittsville, is that correct? Okay, that'd be incredibly hard to answer because you're looking at a whole bunch of different budget categories, transit, roads, social services, garbage. Be very difficult to say, money in, money out. Stittsville deserves its fair share, would be my answer to that. We pay a lot of property taxes. We pay some of the highest taxes. Want to make sure that that money is invested back in our community. One area in particular is around development charges. A lot of those development charges get shared citywide. I'd like to work to make sure that they're coming towards projects that are important to Stittsville, like the Carp Road expansion, like Robert Grant, like improvements to Stittsville Main Street. So that would be my approach.
Okay, thank you very much, Glenn. Is there another question there? No, I guess not. On a lighter note, I wanted to ask the youngest participant here if they had a question. There's a wee baby at the back, but it's been very quiet. Okay, so I'll choose now 3 more numbers. We're approaching our grand finale here. We're at 291, 288, and 304. Any takers on those numbers? I shall keep picking. We're getting to, I can see the bottom of the jar very easily now. So
bingo.
Oh, we got one. Oh, brilliant. Okay, very good.
I was the third one called. I didn't want to jump in early.
Oh.
So my question is for both candidates.
Okay.
A lot of the questions we've heard tonight are dealing with symptoms of reactive infrastructure execution. The traffic, the LRT, the bus routes, they're all behind the power curve. So my question would be to both candidates, what would be a plan to get ahead of the power curve? To not get behind and to be proactive in the infrastructure development in advance of the development.
Thank you very much. We'll begin by asking Glen Gower to answer that question.
Yeah, excellent question. I think we've clearly identified the symptoms. We've clearly identified what's happening. I've proposed, again, it's on my website, some ideas on ways that we can move forward. One of those would be limiting the urban boundaries. So there'll be a decision coming up in this term of council as to whether or not to allow more expansion in the suburbs, more urban sprawl. So there's a very specific example. We can make a decision to limit that sprawl, focus more on growth within the community. In terms of infrastructure, I think we need to proactively work with other levels of government. If we're chronically underfunded through property taxes and through development fees on what we can afford, the things we need, the roads and the transit that we need, just like we have with big light rail projects, find other partners to come to the table, work with developers as well. They're totally invested in building healthy communities. They care about the health of the cities that they invest in. So a couple examples that I could give you of ways that we could proactively start to move and get ahead of the game rather than always being catching up and staying behind.
Thank you, Glenn. Now, Shad?
Thank you very much, and thank you for a question. In terms of the projects, like proactive, I think we are proactive. We may not be proactive in terms of fast enough or quick enough, especially in a developing community like ours. I mean, our growth has exploded in the last 10 years, maybe 12 years, and it's going to continue that way. So the proactivity on those infrastructures already started. Carp Road, environmental assessment done. We got to build it, it's coming. Robert Grant Avenue. So we are proactive in terms of projects that we've already out there that are already on paper, that are already ready to develop. The problem is when a developer builds, and I said that earlier, he or she is not responsible for building those projects. So one of the things that the city uses is something called front-ending a project. And Robert Grant, phase 1 from Fernbank to Abbott Street was exactly that. It was a front-ending project. We said to the landowners in that area, you pay for that today. We will pay you back when we get development charges back from your development. It's the same thing I'm working with towards phase 2, working with the landowners in that area and say, look, build me phase 2 in a front-ending agreement and we'll pay you back later. The issue that becomes is the time of that payback. City says we'll pay you back in 10, 15 years. Developers and their banks are saying, no, we want to pay back within 3 to 5 years. So that's where sometimes the big sticking point comes in with the front-ending agreement. But I'm totally in favor of doing front-ending agreement, and we've done a number of those in this community from the developers working with the city going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shad. The good news is I think we've had 27 questions, which is brilliant. We have 5 more tickets in this jar, so I'll call them all 5 out now. People are beginning to ask me when we're ending, and technically we're supposed to end at 9:15. So we're on the last 5 questions. If anybody has a burning question, we'll be happy to give you a ticket as well. But this is the last roll call. 292, 273, 281, 287, and 280. Do we have some people? Yeah. Excellent. This is looking very hopeful. Okay, please come forward.
Thanks. Hi, my question is for Shad. It's regarding a remark you made earlier about wanting to have a world-class city, Stittsville becoming a world-class city. I've lived in world-class cities my entire life, and I had a home built on Maple Grove in 2009 because I wanted to live in a livable city. I thought I heard you say earlier about your plan to open up Stittsville, Maine at Maple Grove. My understanding is that already we have more community developments slated for Maple Grove in addition to the overload of commuting that keeps all of us up at night.
And did you ask your question?
How can opening that up make us livable here in Fairwinds?
Thank you very
turn
much.
it into a livable city.
And this question is directed to Shad.
Thank you very much for the question. And in terms of the opening of Main Street to Maple Grove, that has been in the plan for the city for a long time to make that connection. I understand your issue in terms of, building a house on Maple Grove Road and seeing this traffic come through. But as it was mentioned earlier, Main Street, that's not the end of Main Street there. It's going to go to Palladium. Once that opens up, it's going to lighten traffic on Maple Grove Road. It's going to lighten traffic on Huntmar and Maple Grove itself, going north on onto the Palladium. The other thing that's happening in the future, and I don't know in the next 2 years, I'm not saying that, but in the next 10 years, is Huntmar is going to be widened between Maple Grove to the 470 or to the Palladium interchange. It's going to be supposedly a 4-lane road. In terms of Maple Grove itself, from Terry Fox to Huntmar is going to be a 4-lane road, and from Huntmar west towards your area is still going to remain a 2-lane road. So the connectivity for Main Street to Maple Grove is necessary for not only the traffic flow, but to make those connecting roads that we all care about.
Thank you, Shad. Glenn, would you like to answer the question now?
I think it was addressed to Shad, but
okay.
Same
right.
my whole theme.
No,
healthy development requires road
Yeah,
infrastructure, transit
much,
infrastructure,
thank you
sooner
very much.
than later.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, so that kind of, we have another question yet. 1, 2 to go. Okay.
Too high. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Gloria Weir, and excuse me, I am an advocate for seniors, and I would like to know how both of you, my question is addressed to both of you, will protect those people that have built this Stittsville to have the reputation it has today. We have downsizing of seniors. I'm very protective of seniors. And I would like to know that if you have affordable living on the platform, how would those people that have built this community have a place in that? Thank you.
So this is to both councillors as well, you said? To both councillors?
To both, yes.
Okay, so I'd invite Glenn to answer first.
Yeah. Before I answer, I do want to say we're doing an event, a seniors meet and greet next Tuesday night at the Legion. So there are some flyers outside that you can pick out. There are obviously a lot of young people coming into the community, younger families. Personally, I've been here for 9 years, and we moved here because we saw the great community that's here, the historic Main Street, the great communities that already exist. And I have absolutely zero doubt that anyone, old or young, who's in this community share the same kind of values and goals and vision for this community. I want to make sure that we have, continue to have a strong network of support and services for senior citizens, whether that's transit or paratranspo, whether that's activities that we have available at the recreation centers and so on. One thing we haven't talked a lot about today is safe streets and the role that safe streets plays for people in our community. For example, Stittsville Main Street, there's 2 major seniors home developments that are currently under construction. There's another one on Hazeldean Road. Are we looking at things like safety for walking times and crossing times and street lighting, making sure that we're listening to the needs and the concerns of seniors and integrating that into how we continue to grow and build our community?
Thank you, Glenn. Shad, would you like to answer?
Thank you again for the question. In terms of the seniors in this community, you're absolutely correct. Most of the seniors that are living in this community today have helped develop this community. I mean, I can mention umpteen numbers of names in this room right now that are present here. Seniors are one of those populations in this community that deserve that recognition, deserve to live in this community. I love the young people that are moving in. Great, because we got a vibrant community now, from a seniors level and from a young person's level. Fantastic. But in terms of seniors in this community, needs to be recognized for their development opportunities that they have produced in this community. In my term of council, I've named X number of facilities and street names and stuff that have been dedicated to seniors in this community, or seniors that are no longer living but have passed away, unfortunately. Keep your eyes open, there's more to come. In terms of the facilities that are being built between Hazeldean Gardens and the Wellings on Hazeldean Road, as well as the one on Main Street, those are all recommendations for accommodation for seniors. Some of them are affordables, others may be beyond that point of affordability. The thing though, in this community, you've got Daphne Court on Main Street that is very affordable in terms of a seniors area residence. It's single-family, single-story bungalows on Daphne Court that, that are available. So we've got enough product out here. It's just a matter of trying to get the right price on there. And that's where the concern is from seniors like yourself. There's a co-op housing on Carlton Cathcart, the apartment building. And I know Marion Gullick, I don't know whether she's still here. She approached me a number of years ago to do something beside it in that open space. I'm willing to work with Marion and anybody else who wants to approach me and say, what can we do? We can get partners to help build that seniors facility to increase that co-op housing for seniors on Carlton Cathcart.
Thank you, Shad. And now I'd like to invite our very last question, number 30.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Carbonetto. I've been a resident of Stittsville now for 16 years and born and raised in Ottawa West. My question is for both candidates. I've grown up in different areas of Ottawa, in Orleans and whatnot, and seen the rapid expansion and the rapid growth and the pains of such. But I've also seen those pains suffer upon the small independent business owners, the heart of Stittsville, Maine, as many of you can probably relate to. What are the candidates' position on supporting the independent business owners as Stittsville grows, as it expands, to make sure that we still have them in the heart of our town?
Thank you very much. First answer will be given today by Shad on this question.
Thank you very much for the question, Joseph. And I know small business is really dear to you, especially when you operate some of those small business in your capacity. I also want to thank you for your volunteer work that you do with the Knights of Columbus at the church. In terms of small business in this community, we had a plan that Stittsville Main Street was going to be dedicated to small businesses for their use, for their establishment. We gave that Main Street what we call a traditional Main Street zoning. We kept the large box stores out on Hazeldean Road, called it Arterial Main Street. And that's where most of the box stores is, until we saw some box stores infiltrate at Carp and Main Street. So, they're okay, they're there for now. They're not large box stores, some small ones, but some of them are independent grocers. For example, Brown's grocery store. He's been a major part of this community. He almost deserves to be on Main Street. But on the other side of the Main Street, from there south, they're all small businesses. And I encourage small businesses to be located. I mean, Jack Ketch Restaurant is a classic example. Here's a gentleman, Kevin Conway, that grew up in Stittsville, went out and earned his living in terms of learning the skills, came back to this community to open a business. You got the other example in terms of Quitter's Cafe, a very successful business on Main Street, thanks to the support from the community. That's the kind of business you want on Main Street, and there are others that are coming that you can be assured that they're going to be protected and they're going to be working with the community going forward. The biggest thing for a small business is exactly that, to reach out to the community, work with the community, and help in the community. That's how I grew my small business when I had it on Main Street, and I had that business for 13 years. That became a community neighborhood store in this community. My wife and I have been around this community for 40 years. Not necessarily right in Stittsville, but in Goulburn Township, when Glen Gower was part of Goulburn Township.
Thank you very much, Shad. Now I'd like to invite Glen.
I'm a huge booster and supporter of local business here in Stittsville. I've been trying to, for the last few years, remind people. I mentioned Stittsville Central. One of the big reasons I launched that, there were so many small businesses in Stittsville that people hadn't heard about. Covered Bridge Brewing, John and Kathy's Brewery on Ybor Road. Shad's mentioned Quitters and the Jack Ketch. There's Red Gables and Kung Fu Bistro. All of the really exciting developments that people come into Stittsville from other communities to visit, they tend to be locally owned businesses. They employ local people. They generate economic value back into the local community. It's incredibly important. Very encouraged to see the establishment of the Stittsville Business Association in the last year or so, and their goal too is to support local business and encourage or promote that local business to both Stittsville residents and people from beyond. Stittsville Main Street itself provides a really, really exciting opportunity for small, locally owned, independent businesses. One of the reasons that the Jack Ketch located on Stittsville Main Street as opposed to Hintonburg or the Byward Market is because the rents out here, the cost of land is just a little bit lower. It makes it a really welcoming environment for an entrepreneur. It's a lower risk for them to set up. So I'm a huge supporter of local business and look forward to working with the existing independent business owners and the Stittsville Business Association to make sure that people are aware of and support, and we have a thriving local business scene here.
Thank you very much, Glenn. That concludes our question period this evening. And before we go any further, I really truly must thank you all. I think you deserve a round of applause for 30 very good questions. I think it really shows that we do care about our community, and that's very nice to see. So at this point, I've reversed the order of speaking for closing statements because Shad gave the opening one, so now it'll be Glen's opportunity to speak first for his closing statements, and then Shad will have the last closing statement. They each have 4 minutes to address you. So we'll begin then with Glen.
Well, we do live in a great community, and I hope we haven't lost that focus as the two of us have gone head to head here on these issues. We're lucky to live in Stittsville. This is a great place to live. Shad and I have known each other for a long time. We've worked together on projects, and sometimes we've been on opposite sides of the debate. You've heard tonight some common ground on issues between the two of us, and there's others where there's a stark difference between us. What I've hoped you heard tonight is a contrast in approach, how we approach these issues. What I've heard all summer knocking on doors from people is they're looking for a stronger voice for Stittsville. You're looking for a clear vision and new ideas to make sure we continue to evolve as a community as this community continues to grow. And you want a councillor who's responsive to your concerns and focused first on serving you, the residents, and someone who's willing to stand up for Stittsville at City Hall if that's what it takes. That's the kind of representative I will be, and you'll know where I stand on these issues. Before I close, I want to thank the Stittsville Village Association for putting on tonight's event, especially Tanya and Louise and Hélène keeping time over here. I want to take the opportunity to thank the hundreds of people who've helped out on my campaign as volunteers or putting up a sign on their lawn. One of the things I'm proudest about is almost nobody who's working on my campaign has previous political experience. They're doing this because they're invested in the future of the community. They really care about the community. And I especially want to thank all of you for attending. Whether you asked a question, whether you're listening tonight, this is how democracy is supposed to work. And this is how we're going to continue to build a strong and caring community, by coming out and getting involved and getting engaged. I will stick around. If you have any other questions we didn't get a chance to answer, or if I haven't met you yet, I would love to say hello. I'd also invite you to visit my website. It's voteglen.ca. We have a number of public events coming up in the next couple of weeks. So if you want to come out and ask a question or share your concerns, I'd love to hear from you. And I'm looking forward to earning your trust and earning your vote on October 22nd. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Glen. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask Shad to give his closing statements.
Thank you very much, Louise. And once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out this evening to participate in this democratic process. I want to thank Glen for putting his name forward for this process. And I also want to thank the Stittsville Village Association for hosting us tonight. The church, for example, for allowing the space to have it here. I want to thank Louise Biggs as a moderator and keeping us in focus. I also want to thank Ms. Reve for keeping us on time and making sure the discussion moves forward timely. Stittsville is a fantastic community, not a beautiful community, a fantastic community. It's a compassionate community, it's a caring community, and that's what you, ladies and gentlemen, have helped to build. Councillor is only one small piece of that, very small piece. It's the people that do the talking, I do the walking for you. In terms of the community itself, you've heard that over and over again. Fantastic, beautiful, all of those kind of things. Community is not about roads and buildings. Community is about people, people like you. That's what a community is about. That's what a neighborhood is about. We have very successful neighborhoods and community. Do we have growing pains? Every community has growing pains. Whether you're growing or whether you're stagnant, you still have pains. It's for us to manage those pains as well as work with you how to manage those pains. I get umpteen numbers of emails in my office on a daily basis. We answer every one of them. If I missed one, I'm sorry about that. But every email gets answered. I've got 19,300 tweets on social media. I don't pay attention to social media as much, but there's a format now that is part of my life, and we do participate in that. Before I let everybody go this evening, I got a letter that I just received just before I walked into this debate. It reads, "Dear friends and neighbors, my name is Matt Bradley, Bill Bradley's grandson, Stittsville born and raised, and son of Paul Bradley, past mayor of Goulburn Township. The community of Stittsville has been a great place to have called home." Excuse me if I get a little emotional. "The foundation of my NHL hockey career began here in the village amid the community service and involvement of my Bradley family members. Part of my youth involved meeting and getting to know Shad Qadri. From the time when he was a small business owner to today, Councillor Qadri has worked tirelessly for our community, ensuring that sport teams were supported with funding, facilities, and available resources. I was recently honored by having an arena named after me at the Goulburn Recreation Complex, the Matt Bradley Arena. I'm also proud of having received that recognition from my hometown of Stittsville. Thank you, Shad, for the commitment you show daily to our friends and neighbors in this community. If I could reciprocate, I would vote you as our MVP on Team Stittsville. Going forward, I cannot imagine entrusting our community needs and development to anyone more equipped for the job than you. You remain an example to each of us of what it means to serve the community selflessly and with integrity. Thank you for being an example to me of public service. For those of you that are new to Stittsville, I realize you have another option at the poll this term. It is my opinion that there is no one else that can be trusted to build our community through the next 4 years in a way that reflects the increasing diversity of Stittsville and innovative ideas that you are so well known for at City Hall.
Thank you.
Vote Shad.
Thank
Matt
you very
Bradley.
much, Shad. Yeah, and I'd like to ask, excuse me, both our candidates have worked very, very hard this evening, so please give a round of applause for both candidates.
Thank you.
And that concludes our meeting. Please vote October 22nd. Thank you for coming. Pardon? Oh.